Good evening. We're live here at Channel 17. So glad that you could join us. We are continuing our coverage of the primary elections. August 9th is when you will vote on the primary elections. And that is an important day because it's not a heavily attended voting day, but it's certainly an important one. And today we're speaking with Beth Pierce and Richard Dunne, who are both running for the state treasurer's position. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Beth is the incumbent, and Richard is new to the political scene, and we're really interested to hear his answers to these questions along with Beth's. We've prepared questions in advance. The candidates will have 2 minutes each to respond, and they will also be allowed some follow-up. And of course, we're live at this time, and it is, I forget the day, just to remind people what day it is, the 20th of July. The month is moving quickly. So we welcome your calls here at 802-862-3966. So without further ado, why don't we start? Beth, tell us a little bit about why you are running for re-election.
Certainly. Well, I'm Beth Pierce, and I am your state treasurer. Have been the treasurer since January of 2011, and prior to that I was a deputy treasurer beginning in 2003. Prior to that I was a deputy treasurer in another state. All in, I've been doing government finance work for about 39 years, just a little under 40 years actually, of professional experience in government finance. I'm committed to the public sector. I'm committed to working with governments to do what's right to develop prosperity for all of our citizens. And this is my life's work. This is not a 9-to-5 job. It's a 24/7 effort on my part. I love the job. It's the best job in the state. Don't tell the gubernatorial candidates I said that. But it really is an opportunity where you can make a difference in people's lives. And it's been a very rewarding challenge, and I think we've done some really good work and want to continue to do that good work going forward.
Thank you so much. Richard Dunne, tell us why you're running and what qualifies you.
So I'm running to bring new innovative ideas to the department and get the youth involved in politics, because the youth will inherit the state. So it's very important to have our generation involved and have seats in government in order to sort of press the policies that we think the state should develop. And the only way to do so is to grant us positions in government. My experience with Bloomberg as an analyst and with the health insurance industry here in Vermont has given me the ability to really pretty much consolidate the big picture of economic procedures and get a good grasp on where we can move as a state in order to accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish.
Thank you so much. We have a question here for the Democratic candidates for the state treasurer's primary. Good evening. Do you have a question for the candidates?
Two, maybe, actually. One is, there was a lot of talk about divestment before, and it looked to me like divestment would cause earnings for the retirement funds to go down. So I'd like to inquire as to where these two people think the money would come from that we would lose through the stock market possibly. And secondly, retirement and retirement plans are significant mechanisms for people to go into their later years. So what do we have on the table for people at this point who don't enjoy a retirement plan from work?
You mean Vermont citizens, not just state employees?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for your questions. So why don't we start, we had actually a question written about divestment. It isn't just, he's not talking about divestment in general, he's talking about divestment in particular stocks, I think. So perhaps, Richard, you could go ahead and tell us about your position on divesting and the portfolio, how the portfolio is put together for the state.
So for divestment, I see it as a very important thing for the state to accomplish, because the dependence on a finite resource, especially when you're talking about retirees' benefits, it's dangerous, because it essentially is, we know that it's going to run out. And so in order to move towards a more secure portfolio, we need to take the time and divest from the fossil fuel stocks, because they will be stranded assets at some point in the future. And the talk of a carbon bubble is also very dangerous. And we have a lot of big hedge funds that are taking the time to analyze the market, and they are making the decision to divest. So we should follow suit.
And could I just ask a follow-up question to that so we can get to both parts of this, which is do you think the decision-making process should be to decide whether divestment happens? It was fairly politicized in the last legislative session, so
sure.
I wonder if you feel
that was a shame to see, I thought, because I think it's just, it's where the market's going, so it's just a decision that should be made as the normal course of business. So for decision-making power that's invested in VPIC, I like to see that everybody's involved. I do think that we've allocated too much power to our investment managers because they are basically pulling the strings on whether or not we divest or what we invest in pretty much everything. And in the future, I do see pensions and pretty much all portfolios to be managed by artificial intelligence managers, which can calculate thousands and thousands of variables very quickly, much more than a human could ever do, and they stay well ahead of the market. Now, this could really limit the amount of fees that we pay to our investment managers. Right now, we have an active managed portfolio, and active management is unfortunately nowadays just a term used to get more fees from the portfolio itself or from our pension fund. So we need to take a good hard look at where the future is going and where we want to take the pension.
Thank you very much. Beth Pearce.
Okay, I think there are a couple of issues here, and let's start with the one about legislating pension decisions. This past session, there was an effort to legislate the decisions of the VPIC, the Vermont Pension Investment Committee. And I thought that was unwise, making decisions through a political process that affect the lives of 50,000 active, vested and retired members of the three systems, the state, the teacher, and the municipal system, did not seem to me to be the appropriate venue. The legislature, when it created VPIC, gave it the authority to manage the investments and to maximize in return with a reasonable level of risk. And I think the committee has spent its time to do that. I'm a fiduciary as a member of the pension plan, and as a fiduciary, I have a responsibility to those 50,000 individuals. And when we looked at the issue, we said, first and foremost, it should not be a legislative decision. It should be a decision by the board. Now, the board has looked at this in 2013, 14, and 15, and based on the information I had on all those 3 years, I voted against divesting for the reasons that were presented by an independent, not someone who's an investment manager, but an independent fiduciary who doesn't make money by making investments, but acts as a fiduciary to the fund, NEPC LLC, which is our advisor. By the way, the Joint Fiscal Office took a look at our advisor and said that they're an independent advisor, they're reputable, and that they do good work. And from my end, they said that we would lose $9 million a year in annual revenue by making the divestment decision. So for me, that's why I made that decision. However, we continue to evaluate decisions. We continue to look at the markets. Markets change. We continue to look at the horizon. And I agreed, as part of the legislative process, to expand our study and to create an ESG, Environmental, Social, and Governance Subcommittee of VPIC to take a look at this issue. Or I recommended that. Tom Galanka is the chair of VPIC, and he established that committee. And we've been doing this on a very fair process. We invited all the folks in, 350 Vermont, VPIRG, the Sierra Club, folks representing the petroleum industry, and had a very hefty dialogue about how we can do this and what kind of study would be involved. We're also paying for that study out of the Treasurer's office, not the pension fund budget, but out of the Treasurer's. And I invited the advocates, the 350 VPIRG and the folks from Sierra Club, and a gentleman from Clean Yield, who you've referenced in some of your materials, to pick that advisor. We have now, to pick 3 firms, and then we, the subcommittee, would now pick one out of that to do the study. So we're in the process of doing the study. I've had a great working relationship with these folks, and I am going to read a quote, if you don't mind, from the Sierra Club with respect to that process. And the Sierra Club statement was, Treasurer Pierce should be commended for her integrity in the process. We have put together a process to bring the parties together to make a rational decision about the issue.
Thank you so much. I gave Beth a little extra time to explain that. Do you have any follow-up?
So in my opinion, the committee that was formed to decide whether or not to divest should have been formed in order to divest and mitigate the losses that we will have. Because when you divest and when you pull funds, you are going to hit some fees. There's no doubt about it. Mitigating those fees is what's important, because when you take a long-term picture of the investments, we are invested in things that are very, very prone to large crashes. And securing that, I think, is the right way to go.
A couple of things. Number one, I don't think building in losses is the right thing to do as a fiduciary. So for me, that's very important. Also, what you said is, I've already made a decision about divestment. We should be looking at the facts first. The sound bites that were out there, the losses that were stated, were all wrong. What we need to do is define the problems, look at the issues, and then make a decision. Prudence, as an investor, requires a 2-step process. One is to investigate. It's called procedural prudence. Look and evaluate the decision, and then make a decision, a substantive prudence, make a decision. What you're doing is jumping to the next step, which is, I've already made a decision on how I'm going to go, and that's not the right way to do things as a fiduciary. The bottom line is, first define what are the risk-return attributes of it, and then make a decision. I also wanted to correct one point you made about active management. We do have some active management. We look for opportunities for passive management wherever possible, and the types of securities will dictate whether we have a passive or an active management. And if you look at the materials that we handed out at the ESG meeting, I think you came to one of those meetings, you'll see that we've got a list of what's active and what's passive, and the rationales behind those are available if you'd like to check that out.
Any final word, Richard?
Just that, looking at the overall market, it makes sense to move towards divestment and not keep the pension invested in something that's going to rise and fall. It's basically taking a gamble with the money that we have. And the good thing to do, I think, would be to at the very, very least, contact the portfolio managers or the individual funds that are invested and try to get them to, use as much leverage as we have in order to get them to remove their funds from.
I know we got to move on, but could I say one more thing on that? Because we actually have done that, and we talked about it at the meeting you were at the end of August, and folks are invited to tune in, because we do have a number, or you can come to the meeting. We've invited a number of our managers to come in, sit in front of the panel, and talk about climate risk, the stranded asset thesis, and how they build that into their investment process. That was something we discussed at the last meeting that you were at.
Yeah, it wasn't clear whether or not we had actually accomplished that or not.
Well, it's scheduled. I invite you to come on by, as well as other folks that are interested. For me, having an understanding of how that manager works and builds that into the process is very important. If we divest $50 million, let's say, from a particular manager, but that manager has $10 billion of assets under management, if we can move that manager instead of just pulling our $50 million, but we can move that manager to a different review and process that takes a larger look, we've made some choices there that benefit all of us across the country while preserving our fiduciary responsibility. I'm a fiduciary first. At the end of the day, I want my grandchildren to have clean air and retirement security.
Why don't we move on to the retirement security question that the caller asked? And I just want to remind folks, our number is 862-3966. That's area code 802-862-3966. We'd love to hear any questions that you have for the Democratic candidates for state treasurer in the primary coming up August 9th. Retirement and retirement planning in Vermont. Not everyone has a retirement plan. And what do you think the role of the treasurer should be in helping Vermonters become more secure in their old age? And we would start with Beth, 'cause
Certainly.
this question.
Well, I think there's a two-part to this. One, we do have 50,000 people that are in the retirement plans that we are involved in, the state, the teacher, the municipal, those public employees. And we manage those plans. We not only manage the investments through our managers. We don't do direct investing. But we also provide counseling services to those individuals. And when I see those folks come in, especially the folks in my baby boomer generation, they're worried about their future. They're worried about retirement. And we need to recognize that retirement is part the retirement income is part of a promise that was made to them when they became employees of the state. That's compensation for services rendered. For me, that's an important part of having adequate and reliable income in retirement. When you have adequate and reliable income, you spend it. You go out and you buy goods and services. That helps create jobs. So retirement shouldn't be just seen as an expense to the state, but should also be seen as an economic generator. And the question of, well, one of the comments I frequently hear is that a good portion of folks move out of state after retirement. We've done some studies, and well over 75% of the folks that are in those retirement systems stay in Vermont, buy goods and services in Vermont, pay taxes in Vermont, and I think that's very important. Getting to your point, though, what do you say to the people that don't have those retirement plans? And what I would say to them is we raise all boats. It's not a race to the bottom, and that, frankly, we should be looking at ways to help those individuals find opportunities for retirement security. I chair a commission right now, or a committee, that was established by the legislature called the Public Retirement Study Committee, and we're looking at options that we can provide for the 104,000 people, and that's a number that came from AARP, 104,000 people that do not have access to employer-sponsored retirement plans in this state. So we're looking at some options. We got a 2-year renewal on that committee this past year so that we can bring some ideas and then hopefully implement those ideas in the subsequent legislative session. My intent this time would be to bring something to the legislature on this.
Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Nope, you're good. Thank you.
It sounds like a wonderful plan that's been going on. I think setting up a way for citizens to be able to take advantage of defined benefit is very important, because I think that is the most respectable way to retire. I know that the state has recently decreased the amount of employees that they've taken in. I think that it's important to understand and figure out a way to basically increase the amount of state employees that there are. They can start working and contributing towards the overall pension, which would allow them to receive a defined benefit. I think that's very important, that we don't cut off state employment and start contracting out too much, because that's really, at the end of the day, people working for the state and the state working for them creates that symbiotic relationship that allows Vermonters to really be proud of living here.
Great. Did you have a follow-up, Beth?
I do. When you did the VSEA questionnaire, when they talked about privatization, one of the comments you made was it depends on different issues. For me, privatization is not the way to go. Keeping our state employee workforce moving forward and being part of that defined benefit plan. Bottom line for me is I have been a defender of defined benefit plans as deputy treasurer, as treasurer, and will continue to do so. It's the most cost-effective way to provide a retirement for the taxpayer and the most effective way to provide reliable and adequate income for the retiree. So I'm going to continue to advocate for those and continue to advocate that privatization is not the way to go.
Thank you. Richard?
I think that privatization can work in certain cases. It doesn't make a lot of sense to take too much of the state's resources, monetarily speaking, and devote it to something that has already been in working order for many years from a private company that's within Vermont. You're still going to allow the private company to employ Vermonters as long as they have a good retirement system set up for them. Then I see no reason why the state should not work with them.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to this little bit more general question, which is, what has the State Treasurer's Office been doing well? And what are the most important areas for improvement over the next 2 to 5 years? Richard Dunn.
Okay, so what they've been doing very well is they have a very stable bond rating, and they have the ability to move on economic issues that are important socially speaking. So stability is something that they've accomplished. There's no problem there. But backing socially responsible legislation, I think, is something that the office can do really, really well, and that they have not been able, or they haven't accomplished in these past couple of years. So
what is that? Can you just clarify what that means, backing socially responsible legislation? Just so I understand.
Basically, moving as a party, as one, towards things that are going to benefit Vermonters overall is something that's important. Whether it be Democratic or whether it be Republican, the Treasurer's Office has a responsibility to come out and speak to what is actually going to work fiscally in what situation, and make sure that the fiscal situation does not interfere with the social policy.
Okay. And any other areas for improvement or opportunities that you see if you became treasurer?
So areas for improvement would be having the ability to issue bonds, or basically take a look at what is going to make Vermont move in the right direction, such as, so for example, if you want to have affordable housing, you need to make sure that we can issue a bond and have the repayment structure set up for it. And having a repayment structure set up for it could involve taking in new revenue streams from new commodities that we could sell and get tax income from, and make sure that we are backing those bonds with basically the full force of the Vermont State Treasury, which has been a very, very strong department.
Okay, thank you very much. Beth Pierce.
A couple of things. First, let's talk about what a treasurer's office does first, so we can put it in context. We manage $5 billion of inflows and outflows into the system. We manage with a custodian. There's an investment committee, but the custodian for the $4 billion of retirement funds. And as I say, we manage those 50,000 employees, and active employees, vested people, and retired members of those systems. When we talk about change, I think that well, number one, I think we've been rock solid. Our bond rating is the highest in New England. I believe the highest in the Northeast. I have to go check out some of my other states every now and then. But, and we earned that through doing the hard work on the financial management side. This state has never, when we look at the rating agency materials, it's not described as a diversified economy as some of the other states that are AAA competitors. We are AAA by two of the rating agencies, Fitch and Moody's, and AA+, which is the second highest notch by Standard & Poor's. And what they talk about is our financial management and the way that we work, and our conservative debt management policies, which the treasurer is responsible for. So I think we've done a good job there. When we talk about change, pension systems. We've made changes in 2010 that saved the taxpayers $20 million and retained the budget for the retained the retirement security for the individuals. In the subsequent years, we made changes to the health care that saved the taxpayers dollars and provided health care for those members. In this past 2014, we made a change to the way we pay teacher health care that's going to save the taxpayers $480 million through 2038, and at the same time provide a needed benefit for those individuals. That's a win-win that we look for. So when we look for change, we also look for win-wins. This past year, if you take a look at an unfunded liability for pension, and an analogy that it might be similar to a mortgage, we refinanced the mortgage in a different way so that we're going to pay it down faster, more fiscal discipline by the legislature. So we're asking them to put in more now and a lot less down the road, and save the taxpayers another $165 million, and improve the funded status of the plan earlier than was previously done. Those are the ways that you affect real change in the lives of Vermonters. We're also the Public Retirement Study Committee, the local investment program, which I hope we get a chance to talk about today. And we're doing something that's really something called ABLE, Achieving a Better Life Experience, working on retirement security for disabled individuals. These are projects that we've initiated. We're taking them forward with the legislature, and I think that we have been, and I'm very proud of our record and the things that we're doing, and we're going to continue to build on those for a better future for Vermont.
Thank you. Richard, follow up?
No.
Okay. Let's talk about the state-owned bank idea. Much has been touted about North Dakota's state-owned bank. Is this a model that Vermont should consider, Beth?
Okay. Well, we have looked at it, and we've done some studies. I've also looked at studies from the other states, and if you take a look at my file cabinets, we had to move them all out of the office, the amount of material that we had there on these things. We're trying to go more electronic, too. Bottom line for me is that the Bank of North Dakota was formed in 1919, and 1919 versus, you know, the 2016, it's a little different environment. And the banks grew up a little differently there. There's a different banking regulatory process. And trying to take something that was done there and just pop it into Vermont is not going to work. We took a look at the capitalization issues and the amount of capital that would be required to do it. And it simply was frankly out of reach. But we didn't stop there. We brought people together. And what we did as a group, I called the Local Investment Working Group, and we started that in November of 12. And we brought in state banking advocates, sitting at the same table as the banking community, the credit unions, all the V's, as we call them, Vermont Housing Finance Agency, the Vermont Economic Development Authority, Vermont Energy Efficiency Groups, all the different folks, and said, how can we do more local investment? We started with some housing and energy ideas. Those worked really well. The legislature liked it so much, they helped us create 10% in Vermont. So we're now taking 10% of our dollars and putting it back into the local communities. We just finished a project with the Vermont Community Loan Fund, where we're going to be investing in agriculture and in our working landscape. These are the types of things we can do, rather than take a model that didn't grow up with Vermont. Let's take the model that we have here, the agencies that we have here, put them together and create something special, and it really has been special. I love the program to move us forward in terms of local investment.
Thank you so much. Richard Dunn.
So for the state bank, I think that it would be very, very beneficial to have a commercial bank set up, go further than North Dakota has, because that way we're able to eliminate the banking fees that we have now with taking in revenue. We're able to utilize a structure of competition for all your corporate banks and utilize the benevolent system that a state can incorporate in order to drive that competition. And that's really, at the end of the day, what will keep every other bank in the state honest, and developing a community-based loan structure similar to that of credit unions. I'm very, very sensitive to credit unions, so in the development of a state bank, it would be very, very important to work hand in hand with them to make sure that no one is put out of business. And so just working towards something like that would really make a huge difference in Vermont, and I think it would allow a lot of capital to be gained for the low-income Vermonters who they pay $1,000 in rent a month, but they can't go to the bank and get a mortgage for $800 a month. I mean, there's a problem there, and that needs to be figured out. And I think a state bank.
And how does the state just connect those dots for me?
So a state bank can use community-based support system in order to decide on who they're going to give a mortgage to. And it doesn't need to go based just on credit ratings. They can decide on their own methods. And I think that that would help a lot of Vermonters.
Okay. We're at the point for closing comments, if you can believe it. So perhaps, Richard Dunn, you could start with your closing, or end with your closing comments. Anything that you'd like to touch on, or anything you'd like the folks to know about your candidacy? So
essentially what I would like to say is that just overall in politics, we've seen certain definitions of success. And I want to stress that success is, I mean, it's important to each individual. And in politics, we have seen some people base the idea of it off of other people failing. And I think that it's important moving forward that we as a state and as a country see that it's not always in our best interest to see someone else fail. And I think that if we can incorporate that into how we discuss policy with different groups, different political parties, then we can sort of start to make a change overall and have the debates that really matter. Instead of hate-based, it could be policy-based and things like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Beth Pierce, closing comments.
Well, thank you again, and it did go by very fast. You know, when I take a look at what we've done, I'm very proud of the accomplishments that we've had, and we've been able to help individuals, whether it's individuals working with the disabled community, or working with the local investment. When you talk about folks that we're doing energy efficiency in homes through NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, because we're able to make these changes. We're fiduciary. We're also an agent of innovative ideas and bringing us forward as all of us in prosperity together. And I think that that's what the Treasurer's Office focus has been under my leadership. We're going to continue to do that. This is a 24/7 job. I've been committed to it all my life. This is what I do for a living. I'll say right up, I have no other interest. I do not want to run for governor ever. I do not want to run for any other office. Treasury is what I've been doing my entire life. I want to continue to serve Vermonters and help the well-being of all of us together. And working together is important. And I think that we've demonstrated that in the local investment. We demonstrated that when we tackled the issue of the teacher health care funding. We brought all the groups together. That's how we get things done. I'm a very tripartisan person when it comes to working with the legislature. I believe I have the respect of all of the folks there to work together to find solutions for all Vermonters. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to both of you. Richard Dunn and
Thank you for having us.
Beth Pierce.
Thank you.
They are candidates for the Democratic primary. That is the state treasurer position for the Democratic primary. And the election is the 9th of August. So don't forget to vote. And of course, stay tuned here on Channel 17 for continuing coverage of the primaries here in Vermont and Chittenden County. Thanks for watching.